Everywhere I go, I hear Happy Sabbath. I'm not going to say there's anything wrong with that, but I think you'll all agree that, we hear Happy Anniversary, Happy Birthday, but the Sabbath is much more. So it's a blessed Sabbath. So, just real quickly, since I'm new, I'm just going to briefly tell you who I am. I'm a sinner. And where I come from, I'm chief. And that's why what I'm going to share with you this morning makes it all the more important to me. It provides a hope, a strong consolation, and an anchor to my soul. And I can't help but share it with you. So, let me just have just a quick word of prayer. Our Father which art in heaven, we need your help. We pray for your Holy Spirit of truth to guide us. Give us your wisdom, teach us, and help us to understand these things that are only ever so simple. We pray this in Yeshua's name. Amen. Today, I want to acquaint you with the Father. And in so doing, like Jesus said, he that cometh unto the Father must come through me. So I'm going to acquaint you with an identity that, well, wherever we go, we ask, and we get some responses that I'll get to here shortly. But this identity that I'm going to share with you is an inexhaustible theme. And I didn't know my Savior until I learned these things. And so what we're basically going to be doing is studying the sanctuary service. But it's all about this identity that we're going to talk about. And as you know, that's Christ, pictured in Revelation chapter 1. We have asked numerous individual Christians, do you know who Christ is? Without fail, the responses have been yes. Then we have asked if they know who the man in linen is. The responses have been alarming. I have no idea what you are talking about. No, I don't know. No. Who's that? Who is the man in linen? I'm not well versed on the man in linen. Man in linen? I'm not sure. I've never heard of this name, man in linen, before. This is making me uncomfortable. The unfamiliar responses go on. So the man in linen, friends, who is he? We now enter the domain of the divine. In Exodus 3, verse 5, it says, "And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush. And he said, Draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground." This is the domain of the divine. Who is the man clothed in linen? What does the Bible say? Notice what Ezekiel stated he saw. In 9:2, "And behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate, which lieth toward the north. And every man a slaughter weapon in his hand. And one man among them was clothed with linen, with a writer's inkhorn by his side." And in verse 3, "And the glory of the God of Israel was gone up from the cherub whereupon he was, to the threshold of the house. And he called to the man clothed in linen, which had the writer's inkhorn by his side." And then verse 11, "And behold, the man clothed with linen." And he spake to the man clothed with linen. And in 10:6, and it came to pass when he had commanded the man clothed with linen. 10:7, and one cherub stretched forth his hand between the cherubims unto the fire that was between the cherubims, and took thereof, and put into the hands of him that was clothed in linen. Who is the man clothed with linen? Notice what Daniel stated he saw. In 10, verse 5, then I lifted up mine eyes, and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. And in 10:6, his body also was like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. In verse 6, chapter 12, and one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, how long? That word there for how long in the Hebrew is admate. In the Hebrew it's until when. How long, or admate, until when shall it be to the end of these wonders? In 12:7, and I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river. Here we notice that the man, the one that asked the man clothed in linen, how long, in Daniel 12:6, prior to this, the exact same question was asked by another saint. 2 chapters, chapter 8 and chapter 12. So 12:6, and one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, how long shall it be to the end of these wonders? And in 8:13, then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain. The word there for certain is the Hebrew word palmoni. And it's the wonderful number. Now, a lot of Bibles, it's hard to find this fact in the margin, but I have here the Hebrew-Greek Keyword Study Bible. And in the margin, for 8:13, it has, then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake. The certain, it says, or the number of secrets, or the wonderful number. Okay? Who is, we've been discussing who the man in linen is. Who is he? But we have now here in chapter 8 this identity, palmoni, number of secrets, wonderful number. In Daniel 12 we have the man clothed in linen. In Ezekiel, the man clothed in linen. Who is palmoni, the wonderful number? When we turn to Judges 13, 2-3 and 17-18, we find this. And there was a certain man of Zorah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah. And his wife was barren and bare not. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto the woman. And Manoah said unto the angel of the Lord, What is thy name? That when thy sayings come to pass, we may do thee honor. And the angel of the Lord said unto him, Why askest thou thus after my name, seeing it is secret? Again, some Bibles carry this footnote for Judges 13:18. Why askest thou thus after my name, seeing it is secret? The margin, or wonderful. Wow. In the notes, it has here the word translated secret, pali, should be translated wonderful. This is the adjectival form of the noun pili, which occurs in the Messianic prophecy in Isaiah 9:6, which is translated wonderful. This, plus the angel's willingness to accept offerings, he didn't reject it, he accepted the offerings, indicate that this was a Christophany, an appearance of Jesus Christ before his incarnation, the Logos. Coming back to Daniel, here we see that the same question, how long, that was asked of Palmoni, the wonderful number, in Daniel 8, was also asked the man in linen in chapter 12. Same question, one by the another saint in Daniel 8, and same question by one in Daniel 12 was asked to Palmoni and the man in linen in chapter 12. The answer that the man in linen gave is what is strikingly important. Now the fact is, only Palmoni, the wonderful number, in chapter 8, and the man in linen in chapter 12 knew the answer to the question, admite, until when, translated in our King James Version as how long. This first identity in chapter 8, Palmoni, the wonderful number, is mentioned in Judges as being the angel of the Lord, whose name is secret or wonderful. Therefore, can the angel of the Lord, whose name is secret, or wonderful, the man clothed in linen, and Palmoni, the wonderful number, all be the same identity? It becomes apparent from Scripture to so conclude. We have no reason to believe otherwise. Why the designation Palmoni, the wonderful number? Concerning the 2,300 years. Now we talked about it, we have the charts here, we talked about it last night, Daniel 8:14, the 2,300 years. Why the designation Palmoni, the wonderful number, concerning the 2,300 years in chapter 8? The wonderful number? He will be identified in chapter 12 as the man in linen. Ezekiel, the man in linen. Catch the picture. who introduces more wonderful numbers. That is the 1260, the 1290, and the 1335. And he has something to say that's really, really important. And we missed it. But no longer. The angel of the Lord equals secret or wonderful. The man clothed in linen, Palmoni, the wonderful number. Wow. Here, again, Daniel 8:13 and 12:6. Then I heard one saint speaking, and the another saint said unto the certain Palmoni, which spake, Admite, unto when? And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, Admite, until when? The man in linen, he answered the question, Admite, until when? And it's right here in Daniel 8:14, and this is what Daniel 8:14 is all about. And he, Palmoni, the angel of the Lord, the man in linen, said unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. You know that is 1844, right? Okay. He says to Admite, until when? And it concerned two things that was being asked about there in chapter 8. And it was concerning the vision concerning the daily and the transgression. Until when? Concerning those two things, the wonderful number, the man in linen, said unto 1844. Simple. Then, because when 1844 came along and Daniel 8:14 was fulfilled, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. That's when the final atonement began. So in Daniel 12:11, the man in linen answers, and from the time that the daily shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Now, you need to, let me just briefly try and summarize this. There's these two identities in these two chapters of Daniel 8 and 12. Daniel 8, Palmoni, the wonderful number. Daniel 12, the man in linen. They're the same. Christ. He's asked the one question, Admite, until when? Concerning the daily and the transgression. And that wonderful number, who does not get the numbers wrong and cannot, he said, concerning the daily and the transgression, as you just read in Daniel 8:14, unto 1844, right? Unto 2,300 years, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. But here he says, from the time that the daily shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Here, the daily is connected with the 1290. In Daniel 8, the daily, the man in linen said, the wonderful number said, that the daily and the transgression goes until, because of the question, until when? It goes unto 1844. Unto 2,300 days. He connected the daily and the transgression to terminate in 1844. Daniel 12, from the time, and we'll get into that the daily shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, he says there's going to be 1290. This last one is one of two chronologies. The key words there in Daniel 12:11, from the time. Okay? This last one is one of two chronologies. One of two answers to the questions. How long? Admite. Until when? Concerning Daniel 8:14 and 12:6. That the man in linen, the Bible, establishes. And because he said so, it makes it immutable, unchangeable. The two chronologies are right here. The man in linen's answer, Palmoni, the man in linen, said up to 2,300 days. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed, as you know, Daniel 8:14. That you know is the 2,300. And you know that's 457 plus the 2,300 equals 1844. But what is the second chronology? Both are sanctioned by the man in linen himself. I can't change it. And who am I to say anything different? He is the foundation for them both. And this is why the man in linen says the 1290 years terminates at the same point in time as the 2,300 years. Now I know that may come as a shock to you. This is why we must investigate, and this is why this is an inexhaustible theme. The man in linen is saying, concerning the daily and the transgression, unto when? Unto 1844. From the time that it was to be taken away and the abomination of desolation set up was to be 1290 years. You're already given the point of where the daily and the transgression goes unto 2,300 days. It's the second divine chronology that opens up a whole message of present truth for our time. It's the 1290, friends. The daily is the link. The man in linen is the foundation of that date. Admite, 457 plus 2,300, as you know, is 1844. The second chronology, Admite, how long? What's the date? It concerns the 1290. But the man in linen is saying it terminates at the same time as 1844. However, who is the man clothed in linen? Now notice what John the Revelator saw. We've gone from Daniel, Ezekiel. Let's look at what Revelation says. Revelation 1:12-18. And I turned to see the voice that spake with me, and being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire. And his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp, 2-edged sword. And his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength. What a picture. Here we have In Ezekiel, a man clothed with linen. In Daniel, a man clothed in linen. And in Revelation 1, Christ pictured being clothed in linen. Why the linen? And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead, and he laid his right hand upon me, saying unto me, Fear not, I am the first and the last. I am he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Who then is the man clothed in linen? Who knew who the man in linen was before they came here? I had read those texts. I just read over them. But when I saw this, for the first time, I saw Christ as my great high priest. Because remember in the Levitical services, there in Leviticus, it pictures, now I know a lot of people have gotten this wrong, and there's been pictures portrayed in Adventism with Christ standing before the Ark of the Covenant with the ephod on. Leviticus 16 says that the high priest on the Day of Atonement was just dressed in linen. No ephod, no other colors. If the atonement, I know this may come as a shock, but if the atonement was finished at the cross, why then is our great high priest, pictured in Revelation, being revealed to us now, being clothed in white, just like the high priest on the Day of Atonement, if it was all finished at the cross, if there was no dual atonement? Mainstream Christianity as a whole, in their statements, in the books that they've published, and what they teach, have the atonement finished at the cross. The Bible, the man in linen, is saying otherwise. And to lock it in that much stronger, he provides you with a second divine chronology to prove 1844. This puts to silence the evangelicals and everybody else who wants to trash the sanctuary doctrine and tear up Daniel 8:14. Who then is the man clothed in linen? It's Jesus Christ, friends. Our great high priest. There's a picture, as he was pictured in Revelation 1. In the midst of 7 golden candlesticks, clothed in linen, just like Daniel and Ezekiel revealed. And amazingly, we have found that the book of Hebrews, that always used to be a closed book for me, and it was too dense, too hard to understand. I avoided it. I've talked to people that have admitted and confessed that they avoid the book of Hebrews. It's too deep. We have found that the book of Hebrews, we've complicated it, but we have found in studying the man in linen and this second divine chronology, which proves the dual atonement to be an inexhaustible theme. And it's the everlasting gospel. Without it, sadly, Laodicea said, Adventists hold no theory to a dual atonement. In the Catechism, it was all finished at the cross. And all throughout the whole rest of mainstream Christianity, no dual atonement, finished at the cross. Christ hath redeemed us once for all. But the Bible says the sacrifice was once for all, not the atonement. So King David, under divine inspiration, provides the following for us in Psalms 110. There is a divine viewpoint in prophecy, and it is immutable, unchangeable, inexhaustible. Psalms 110, verse 4. Thou art a priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek. The man in linen, friends, is our great high priest after the order of Melchizedek. And now you can prove it. You can prove it by two chronologies. You can prove it from the Bible. When before it was really, really hard to, and we couldn't. And sadly, this is what happened in the 1950s when we had in Laodicea, there was the evangelical conferences. If they had known this, would they have compromised and then afterwards Adventists hold no theory to a dual atonement? Our great high priest, the man in linen, Jesus Christ. Our great high priest after the order of Melchizedek. Is there any connection with the man in linen in Ezekiel, Daniel, and Revelation that we now know is the same identity? Halmoni, the wonderful number, Christ, the angel of the Lord, all the same. Is there any connection to Leviticus 16 and the book of Hebrews? We can now prove a dual atonement from the New Testament. And surprisingly, the book of Hebrews is there, and it's been sitting there all along. And it's actually a summary of the everlasting gospel. Because when you turn to Revelation 14:6, if you want to turn there with me, and I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel. That means age long. It goes from the beginning of the age to the end of the age. And what we have found in the book of Hebrews about Christ, the man in linen, although it doesn't use the words man in linen in the book of Hebrews, what do you find in the book of Hebrews from cover to cover? Christ, the Apostle Paul is introducing you to Christ as your great high priest after the order of Melchizedek. And it's this continuing theme all the way throughout the whole book of Hebrews. And Paul summarizes that everlasting gospel right there. Interestingly, Jesus, in John 4:22, in speaking to the woman at the well, he said, "Ye worship, ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews." In other words, what was given to the Jews was the original blueprint, schematic, plan of salvation on how God was going to save man. How was he going to do that? He had to resolve the sin problem in sinful flesh. And unless he does that, we will go on sinning and repenting and sinning and repenting until Christ comes. And a lot of people believe that's when they'll be changed. No. We will be lost. Jesus said in John 4:22, salvation is of the Jews. So we need to know what was given to the Jews to understand our salvation. Romans chapter 9. Verse 4. Paul says, "Who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption, and the glory, and the covenants, and the law of God," the giving of the law, "and the service," catch that, the service of God. Paul says what was given to the Israelites was the service of God. Jesus says salvation is of the Jews. Romans chapter 11. When you read it, it has been, for many, for a long time, including myself, hard to be understood, an enigma. In verse 17, Paul says, "And if some of the branches be broken off, and thou being a wild olive tree, wert grafted in among them, and with them partakest of the root and fatness of the olive tree." And in verse 20, well, because of unbelief, they were broken off. What was given? What was given to ancient Israel that they partakest of the root and the fatness of the olive tree? What was it? What did they disbelieve in? It was given to them. What did they disbelieve in that caused them to be broken off? Jesus said salvation is of the Jews. What was given to them why they were broken off? What was given to them for them to be enabled to partake of the root and fatness of the olive tree? It was the everlasting gospel. Revelation 14:6. It's just that simple. And that everlasting gospel undeniably proves a dual atonement. In an age where everywhere you turn, the message, the present truth, the everlasting gospel, Jesus' words, why he said salvation is of the Jews, everything is trampling upon that. Now is when we need to understand it, and it's not hard. And we need to be able to share it with others, because without it, there is no latter rain. There is no cleansing. In the type services, there in Leviticus, there was pictured in Leviticus 4 an atonement resulting in forgiveness, and that was during the daily service. Hence the daily in Daniel. Okay? In Leviticus 16 is pictured what God wanted them to do on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. There you have it. An atonement of forgiveness, an atonement of cleansing. That's two. That's a dual atonement. But if we say it was all finished at the cross, we're missing out on Revelation 14. We're missing out on Daniel. We're missing out on 1844. We're missing out on what the pioneers were given, the truth. And it's being trampled. It's not necessary, no more. So, what they were given was the everlasting gospel. Yes?
And you have no high priest.
You have no high priest. Because if the atonement was finished at the cross, what is he doing up there? I used to think that. No. This is a strong consolation, a hope, an anchor, because I sin. That's who I told you I was. And not just because Paul said it. I'm chief of sinners. How do I stop sinning? How does God resolve the sin problem in me? Because Paul said in Hebrews 9:28 that we need to look for him because he's coming back again the second time without sin. He has to resolve it before he comes. Jesus gave you the key. Look to the sanctuary service. the sanctuary doctrine. That, and when you understand that, because that was a type, you'll understand what Christ is doing for you in the heavenly sanctuary. And this is what Paul brought out in the whole book of Hebrews. It's not, and that's why the book of Hebrews summarizes the whole everlasting gospel from the beginning of the age to the end of the age. At the beginning, it was, remember, Cain and Abel, the sacrifice. Abel brought a lamb. It was all picturing that. So the everlasting gospel from the beginning, God gave the everlasting gospel to Moses in the sanctuary service in the wilderness. God even revealed the everlasting gospel to Abraham. Like it says in Galatians. He revealed the gospel to Abraham. And Hebrews 8:5 is another wonderful key. And if you turn there, this is what we have termed a divine dictum. And it is immutable. It says in Hebrews 8:5, concerning the priests that offer gifts according to the law, verse 5, who serve unto the example and shadow of heavenly things. What is Paul telling you? During the daily service, there in Leviticus 4, it gives you the outline of what the priests were to do and what the people were to bring during the daily, every day during the year. In Leviticus 16, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, it outlines what the high priest was to do in going into the most holy place. A lot of people don't realize this. He went in, and as he was working his way out, he was cleansing the heavenly sanctuary. He was cleansing the earthly sanctuary. What the high priest did on that day, Paul says that the priest served unto the example and shadow of heavenly things. That was an example. That was a shadow. Yes, the sanctuary itself, it talks about being a figure. Okay? It wasn't exact. Because when you read Daniel, 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, the judge was set, the books were opened. That's huge. You can't fit that many into that size on earth. That earthly sanctuary was a figure. The service was the example. And it was a shadow. As Paul says in Colossians, a shadow of things to come. Turning to Hebrews 6:17. We have asked many, and I'll ask it now this morning. In 6:18, Paul says that by two immutable things. Does anyone know what these two immutable things are? We ask people. And a lot of the answers that were given are not wrong. Because he just told you in verse 17, wherein God, willing more abundantly to show unto the heirs of promise the immutability of his counsel, confirmed it by an oath. So when he's trying to show something, the promise, the heirs of promise, the immutability of his counsel, he confirmed it by an oath. The counsel, the oath. So when we ask people, what are the two immutable things? Well, the counsel and the oath. Great. What is the counsel? What is the oath? And that's where it usually stops. This is what proves, right there, two immutable things. Remember? Immutable means unchangeable. I can't change it, neither can you. Two immutable things in which it was impossible for God to lie, He didn't lie to us about this. We might have a strong consolation. That's what it means to me. And I'm hoping that's what it'll come to mean to you too. Who have fled for refuge to lay hold upon the hope set before us, which hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which entereth into that within the veil, whither the forerunner. That forerunner is our great high priest, clothed in linen, pictured now as being clothed in linen, just like the high priest on the Day of Atonement, which just basically means 1844 is locked in. It is the beginning of a ministration that Christ was going to minister in the heavenly sanctuary for you. And it involves cleansing. He can forgive us of our sins, but He also wants to cleanse us from all unrighteousness, 1 John 1:9. Without that cleansing, in the type, in the sanctuary service, ancient Israel, without the high priest going in and performing that cleansing, they could not be cleansed. And you had an option. You could afflict your soul or not. If you afflicted your soul and did no work on the Day of Atonement, which for us, on this antitypical Day of Atonement, it's not our works. And this is where the whole message of righteousness by faith comes in. And it links in with Christ, because He's doing it all for us. We cannot do it of ourselves. That by two immutable things, so the counsel, the oath. I'll just draw it up here real quickly for you. And I don't know how much time I have left. You tell me. You've got the counsel, and the oath. These are two immutable things. I'll just abbreviate that. Two immutable things. This is the first, the counsel, and the second, the oath. Does anybody know what they are? When I saw this, I was like, oh, wow. I have to share it. Please go to Zechariah 6:13. Which says, even he shall build the temple of the Lord, and he shall bear the glory, and shall sit and rule upon his throne, and he shall be a priest. Here's sanctuary language. He shall be a priest upon his throne, and the counsel of peace shall be between, in Hebrew, the two of them, between them both. Okay? Now Psalms 2:7. What we're basically doing is, Paul says two immutable things. We can, from verse 17, determine that it's the counsel and the oath. But now we need to determine what the counsel is and what the oath is, and then it creates a wonderful, beautiful picture. That once you see it, you'll never forget it. Psalms 2:7. Which says, I will declare the decree. Okay? The Lord has said unto me, thou art my son. This day have I begotten thee. So it concerns Christ being decreed a son. Hebrews 5:5. And if you're looking at your Bible right now, you'll see that here in Hebrews 5:5 and verse 6, because there was no chapter breaks, when Paul gets to chapter 6, verse 18, and then he says two immutable things. There's no chapter break. He's still telling you about something. And he told you about two immutable things in Hebrews 5:5 and Hebrews 5:6. Okay? Two immutable things. And then he goes to verse 18 of the next chapter. That by two immutable things, the council, the oath. You know now the council concerns the council of peace. You know that there was a psalm that said there was going to be a decree. Thou art my son. Okay? John 3:16, as we all know, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And the reason why, as you know, he gave that only begotten Son was for what? The cross. Our Savior died for us in our sins on Calvary. That's why he became a son. Hebrews 8:3. And this is your key for knowing what really the two immutable things are. As well as 9:23, but we'll get to that. In Hebrews 8:3, for every high priest is ordained to offer gifts and sacrifices. Wherefore, it is of necessity that this man have somewhat also to offer. Necessity. Turning to the oath. In Psalms 110, verse 4, which we read earlier, I'll read again. And we're almost done. The Lord hath sworn and will not repent. Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. That determines what the oath is. The Lord has sworn. That's an oath. Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And I'll abbreviate this. He is our great high priest after the order of Melchizedek. Hebrews 5, verse 6. Coming back to the place in the Bible that tells you what the two immutable things are. Hebrews 5 was thou art my son. And it concerned, he was the decreed son for the necessity. Because he had someone also to offer. The second, the oath. He swore, thou art a great high priest. Hebrews 5:6, which says, and he saith also in another place, thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Hebrews 9:23. This is the most important verse, I think, in the book of Hebrews, in the New Testament. Why? Because it proves a dual atonement. It proves that I can be cleansed. Because without it, we can know a lot of other stuff. But without this, it profits us nothing. Hebrews 9:23. It was therefore necessary . Okay? Necessary. So here, the first immutable thing is the necessity. The second immutable thing is the necessary. Necessary what? It was therefore necessary that the patterns, those things down on the earth, the sanctuaries, the earthly tabernacle, it was therefore necessary that the patterns of things in the heavens, those patterns that were a pattern of that up there, had to be cleansed, had to be purified with these, the blood of animals. But the heavenly things themselves with better. Animal blood can't cleanse me. If it could have cleansed them, they wouldn't have needed to keep going over from one day of atonement to another and to another. Animal blood cannot save us, it cannot cleanse us, but there's better sacrifices that can, and it's necessary. And those better sacrifices is the sacrifice that the Father gave and the Son gave. And this cleansing is necessary. And I hope I didn't go over too far. Is it? Okay. Can I stop now? Okay. Thank you very much. I hope that helps. And this is, again, for me, it's a strong consolation. Because this, Jesus said, John 4:22, salvation is of the Jews. That is showing how God resolves the sin problem in my miserable, sinful flesh. Thank you.